everyone, Joe Baker here from the Edit Bay. I hope everybody had a great holiday. I got the gift that keeps on giving this year, Element 3D version 2. So I thought I'd share my first impressions with you. Before I do that, I should tell you, I am by no means a 3D artist. I've never worked with a dedicated 3D app such as Cinema 4D or 3ds Max. All of the 3D work I've done has been right here in Element or in Photoshop. Photoshop is clunky, to say the least. It's extremely slow, so even with stills, I do tend to send everything over to After Effects and do my 3D work over here in Element. So let's go ahead and get started with this rundown. In addition to a whole host of new features, Videocopilot did promise some speed increases with this, which is definitely apparent. In fact, I created this comp right here, and I'm recording this tutorial on my laptop just to prove that point. I'm running at half res right here, and as you can see, this is pretty responsive considering I've got a lot going on right here. I've got a particle layer for that haze, smoke element. Of course, Element 3D, and I've also got shallow depth of field with the camera. So this is all pretty responsive. I'm definitely happy with that. The new features that everybody was requesting was the ability for Element to cast shadows, and I wanted to go ahead and share my experience with that. Again, I'm not an experienced 3D artist, so I'm sure if you are an experienced 3D artist, you're going to say, yep, of course, Joe, of course that's the situation. But I know on Videocopilot, when they were advertising this plugin, what they did is they had 3D extruded text on a background, and it kind of looked to me as, inexperienced, that it was just a solid layer that they lined up the 3D text to and shined a light on it to get these shadows right here. And what I learned through try and error is that Element 3D does not work like that. So although it does have the ability to cast shadows, it can only cast shadows onto itself, meaning this background layer right here was actually created in Element. This is part of the same group, or excuse me, part of the same instance of Element, just on a separate group. So this could just as easily be, aligned with a solid layer in your After Effects comp and then made to be invisible, so that so that it appears that it is casting a shadow on that solid layer. But that is something you might want to keep in mind. I know this might be a silly assumption by me, not being a 3D artist, but that's something I did have to learn away. They've also revamped the user interface of the screen setup page. So let me go ahead and shut off some of this stuff so that things will run a little bit smoother. All right, come up here to the element layer, effect controls, and enter the scene setup. So right off the bat, we can see things are a little bit different. We've got this grid over here, which is a little bit more consistent with dedicated 3D apps. Looks a lot nicer. We've got some new scene materials down here. Another question I had, and I searched Videocopilot for an answer, and I unfortunately was unable to find it, so I'm happy to report that if you had Pro shaders from version 1 of Element 3D, those will still work in version 2. Because I know they are still selling a second version of Pro shaders, which I know it's a little bit confusing, but yeah, if you do have that question, they will still work. That's what I have. I have not upgraded to the version 2 of the Pro shaders. I do still have the materials right here for Pro shaders from version 1. I'm also really happy with the way that this thing has been redesigned, and like I said, it is more consistent with a dedicated 3D app, but it's also really easy to duplicate things within inside of here. In fact, if you just use the keyboard commands that you would in Audition and Premiere, where you hold down the Alt or Option key, left click and drag, you can actually duplicate any element within your scene, which is really handy if you are creating a complex scene. Go ahead and delete that real quick. I'm going to close this out, go back over here to the After Effects interface. So a lot of the additional features that we have down here have to do, we've got subsurface scattering now. Ambient occlusion as well as shadows can now be cast onto a background, which is what you can see. I did this here. I did that right here. Fog is still the same, motion blur still works the same. We now have reflection options as well. So I don't want to repeat a lot of the stuff that they've already covered on Videocopilot's website, but I think the purpose of this tutorial was just to explain that, this is an awesome plugin for somebody like me who has not really, dived into 3D head first. I'm just I use it as needed. I use it mostly to extrude text, to be quite honest. But the speed with this program is worth its weight in gold. If you've ever worked with Photoshop and done 3D in Photoshop, it's ridiculously slow, and the results are not fantastic. So even with working with stills, if you wanted to extrude some text, it's actually worth it just to send that Photoshop comp or Photoshop project over to After Effects and add that text right here in Element. It's lightning fast, and if you're like me and you're learning and you want to be creative and try new things and fiddle around with the program until you can create something, you're going to want that speed. You really are. You're not going to want to be messing around, moving the playhead and then waiting for stuff to render and, having your computer freeze up. Excellent, excellent, excellent plugin. As I get more familiar with this plugin, I'd be happy to put some more tutorials together for those of you guys who request any. As always, feel free to leave a comment in the box below. Until next time, I'm Joe Baker with the Edit Bay. Take care.